The title to today's message is Sacred, Scarred, and Scared. It's a pretty apt description for who we are as God's people. The focus of this message will be on what's happening next week, our All Saints' Day celebration. And to the best of my knowledge, this will be our first All Saints' Day celebration as the United Church, which means it's something new and different for us. Something new and different in spite of it being an ancient traditional practice. So my hope is that together we will live into that ancient Jewish vision, where the old is renewed and the new is made holy. Because it's new to us, because it's something we've never done before, I want to set some expectations and lay some foundations, which hopefully will keep us from screwing things up. And the best way I know to do this is by sharing the story of how another church went about hosting their first All Saints' Day celebration. This is a story told by Nadia Bowles-Weber, and it's found in her book. I don't know if that's backwards to you. It looks backwards to me. Accidental Saints. And the subtitle is Finding God in All the Wrong People. And I'm reading from chapter 1. And the title is Saint Cookies. Early in the life of House for All Sinners and Saints, we began a tradition of making saint cookies on All Saints' Day. All Saints' Day is a feast day when the church recognizes how thin the veil is between life and death. It's a day when the church remembers all who have gone before us, all who are now glorified, and all who will follow. Part of their tradition is to ring a bell for each loved one. That's a footnote. So the chapter goes on. I scoured the internet for old or weird practices we could borrow, and I'm certain I read something that described how, in Finland or someplace like that, people make saint cookies, like gingerbread men and women, who get handed out as part of the All Saints Sunday celebration. I swear that's what I remember. So, when we were baking up our church from scratch, a few folks gathered in my tiny kitchen to bake up some gingerbread men and women from scratch, thinking it was a thing. At one point, I realized that what our little brown saint cookies really needed were halos, obviously. So we painted shiny yellow glaze around the top of each round-headed gingerbread man and women, which made them look not so much holy as blonde. How about these? Victoria asked when she arrived, holding up 2 extra large cookie cutters. She's always been slightly mischievous for a social worker. I think it's her red hair. The cookies for my saints need to be special, she offered. Before the evening was over, Victoria was proudly showing off 2 special saint cookies that stood inches above their fellows. One, a woman had flames of red and yellow licking her skirt, accompanied by big eyes and an open mouth that looked borrowed from Mr. Bill. Joan of Arc? I guessed correctly. Next to Joan was a fellow saint, but this one looked like he was wearing a belted, one-shoulder caveman outfit, and he was missing his head. Martyred Fred Flintstone, I guessed incorrectly. John the Baptist, she said proudly. Of course. Victoria volunteered to bring the basket of completed saint cookies to hand out after liturgy the next day. Not surprisingly, they proved to be a great way to bring some levity to what was an otherwise heavy liturgy. What we now know is that saint cookies are not a tradition anywhere but the house for all saints and sinners. At least nowhere I could find when I went back to the internet later. Apparently, I just dreamed that shit up. Victoria's basket of saint cookies sat on the edge of a long series of draped white tables that lined the wall. Each table was dotted with candles, marigolds, and various remembrances of the dead. The worn soft denim overalls of someone's granddaddy who was a farmer, an icon of Mary Magdalene, an icon of Cesar Chavez, a photo of a group of friends from the 80s, a child's blanket, a shrine that my parishioner Amy Clifford had made for Vincent van Gogh, a small painted box that stood on an end, his self-portrait glued to the inside, and ears, one of which was missing, glued to the sides. Apart from those who have fallen in combat, Americans tend to forget our ancestors, and we spend as little time as possible publicly mourning them. But in the church, we do the very odd thing of proclaiming that the dead are still part of us, a part of our lives, and are an animating presence in the church. St. Paul describes the saints as a great cloud of witnesses. So when they have passed, we still hold them up, hoping perhaps that their virtues, their ability to have faith in God in the face of an oppressive empire, or a failing crop, or the blight of cancer, might become our own virtue and our own strength. As I surveyed the basket of saint cookies sitting next to the lovingly arranged photos, shrines, and names simply written on index cards, I was thinking how amazing it is that there is a holy day when we honor those who have gone before. And then I saw her name, Leo. Not, the name is not Leo. And then I saw her name, and I winced, even though I was the one who had hesitantly written Alma White. You see, a couple of months earlier, I had been walking down Sherman Street in Denver with my parishioner, Amy Clifford, an artsy, thoughtful, passionate woman who had been by my side helping to build our church. On our walk that day, we noticed a sizable memorial of sorts in the courtyard of a large, weird-looking church across the street from the Colorado Capitol building. The roof of the Pillar of Fire Church is crowned with the enormous pink call letters KPOF that light up at night, making it look like what it is, a Pentecostal church that doubles as a radio station. We squinted to read the inscription on the memorial. Alma White, founder of the Pillar of Fire Church, 1901. Turning to Amy, I said, Alma? That's a woman's name, isn't it? Did a woman plant a church in Denver in 1901? I didn't know of many women who had set out to start churches all by themselves, much less at the turn of the 20th century. So desperate as I was for someone I could place in the category of hero and role model, since I too was setting out to be a female pastor of a new church in Denver, I pulled out my phone and Googled Alma White. My excitement about discovering a hero only built as I read her Wikipedia entry. Alma Bridwell White, June 16, 1862 to June 26, 1946. She was the founder and a bishop of the Pillar of Fire Church. Oh my gosh, it's true. I went on to read that in 1918 she became the first female bishop in the U.S. She was noted for her feminism, yes, and her association with, wait for it, the Ku Klux Klan. Her anti-Catholicism, anti-Semitism, anti-Pentecostalism, racism, and her hostility to immigrants. Ugh. The next day, I called my Episcopal friend Sarah to tell her the story of how I thought I had a hero only to find out she was just a lousy racist. And Sarah's response? Email her name to me. I'll add her to the litany of saints, along with all the other broken people of God. I didn't want Alma White's name on the litany of all the saints. Having her name lying on the table, illuminated by the nearby Paschal candle, alongside the names of St. Francis and Cesar Chavez, felt wrong. I want racists to stay in the racist box. When they start sneaking into the saint box, it makes me nervous, but that's how it works. On All Saints' Day, I am faced with sticky ambiguities around saints who were bad and sinners who were good. Personally, I think knowing the difference between a racist and a saint is kind of important. But when Jesus again and again says things like, the last shall be first, and the first shall be last, and the poor are blessed, and the rich are cursed, and that prostitutes make great dinner guests, it makes me wonder if our need for pure black and white categories is not true religion, but maybe a sin. Knowing what category to place hemlock in might help us know whether it's safe to drink. But knowing what category to place ourselves and others in does not help us know God in the way that the church so often has tried to convince us it does. And anyway, it's been my experience that what makes us the saints of God is not our ability to be saintly, but rather God's ability to work through sinners. The title saint is always conferred. It's not earned. Or as this good Saint Paul puts it, for it is God who is at work in you, enabling you both to will and to work for his good pleasure. Philippians 2:13. I've come to realize that all the saints I've known have been accidental ones. People who inadvertently stumbled into redemption like they were looking for something else at the time. People who have just a wee bit of a drinking problem and manage to get sober and help others do the same. People who are as kind as they are hostile. Next to Alma on our All Saints table was an icon of another accidental saint, Harvey Milk, the first openly gay person elected to public office in California, who was shot to death by a fellow city employee in 1978. The icon showed Milk standing in front of the Golden Gate Bridge with 5 silver bullet holes in his chest and a golden halo behind his head. The icon was created by Bill, one of our congregation's artists, who called me later when someone challenged him for creating a visual representation of sainthood for someone who was not even Christian. I explained to Bill that what we celebrate in the saints is not their piety or their perfection, but the fact that we believe in a God who gets redemptive and holy things done in this world through, of all things, human beings who are flawed. And I really do believe that. Yet when I hung up the phone, all I could think about was how hard it is for me to believe that what's true of Alma White or Harvey Milk might also be true of me. That maybe God can use me despite the fact that I, in so many ways, am ill-suited for the work I do. Yet that is my experience. I keep making mistakes, even the same ones, over and over. I repeatedly attempt and fail to keep God and my fellow humans at arm's length. I say no when I say yes, when I should say yes, and I say yes when I should say no. I stumble into holy moments not realizing where I am until they're over. I love poorly, and then accidentally say the right thing at the right moment without even realizing it, and then forget what matters, and then show tenderness when it's needed, and then turn around and think of myself way too often. I simply continue to be a person that God works. I simply continue to be a person on whom God is at work. And I don't even seek that out, to be honest. I do admire those who take on spiritual practices, who seek a sense of well-being through yoga or meditation or quiet times. But other than lifting really heavy weights every morning at my CrossFit gym, I honestly can't think of what practice I do that helps me become more spiritual. I can, however, talk endlessly about the way I've been thrown on my ass over and over by the Bible, the practices of the church, and the people of God by religion. I recently was asked by a earnest young seminarian during a Q&A, Pastor Nadia, what do you do to personally get closer to God? And before I even realized that I was saying it, I replied, what? Nothing. Sounds like a horrible idea to me, trying to get close to God. Half the time I wish God would leave me alone. Getting closer to God might mean getting told to love someone, I don't even like, or to give away more of my money. It might mean letting some idea or dream that is dear to me get ripped away. My spiritually is most active, not in meditation, but in the moments when I realize God may have gotten something beautiful done through me, despite the fact that I'm an asshole. And when I'm confronted by the mercy of the gospel so much that I can't hate my enemies. And when I'm unable to judge the sin of someone else, which, let's be honest, I love to do, because my own crap is too much in the way. I realize God may have gotten something beautiful done through me, despite the fact that I'm not a good person. When I'm forgiven by someone, even though I don't deserve it, and my forgiver does this because he too is trapped by the gospel. When traumatic things happen in the world and I have nowhere to place them or make sense of them, but what I do have is a group of people who gather with me every week. People who will mourn and pray with me over the devastation of something like a school shooting. And when I end up changed by loving someone I'd never choose out of a catalog, but whom God sends my way to teach me about God's love. None of these are the result of a spiritual practice or a discipline, as admirable as those things can be. They are born in a religious life, in a life bound by ritual and community, by repetition, by work, by giving and receiving, by mandated grace. This is the form church takes at House for All. As Stephen, one of my parishioners, puts it, our ministry is word and sacrament. Everything else flows from that. We see a need, we fill it. We screw up, we say we're sorry. We ask for grace and prayers when we need them, a lot. Jesus shows up for us through each other. We pray, we eat, we sing, we fall, we get up, repeat. It's not that complicated. There are many reasons to steer clear of Christianity, no question. I fully understand why people make that choice. Christianity has survived some unspeakable abominations. The Crusades, clergy sex scandals, papal corruption, televangelist scams. And it will survive us too. It will survive our mistakes and pride and exclusion of others. I believe that the power of Christianity, the thing that made the very first disciples drop their nets and walk away from everything they knew, the thing that caused Mary Magdalene to return to the tomb and then announce the resurrection of Christ, the thing that the early Christians martyred themselves for, and the things that keep me in the Jesus business is something that cannot be killed. It's the power of unbound mercy, of what we call the gospel. It can't be destroyed by corruption or toothy TV preachers, because in the end, there is still Jesus. And I can't shake Jesus, even though I've tried. The gospel, the story of a God who came to us through Jesus and who loved without bounds and forgave without reservation and said that we had the power to do the same, can't be destroyed by all the stupid mistakes you will read about in the chapters that follow. These mistakes, sins, feelings are mine, but perhaps they're ours. And the redemption is ours too. Because if Alma White cannot destroy the light that shines in all her darkness, maybe we can't either. On the All Saints table, between the baskets of St. Cookies and the card showing Alma White's name, we set our first Paschal candle, recently purchased at a Catholic bookstore. During the Easter Vigil and throughout the coming years, we will use it to symbolize Christ's presence in our midst. That year, the candle was new and white, but each Paschal candle since has been created by Victoria out of the melted down remains of all the candles used in the previous month of liturgy, so that, like our church itself, the candle in our midst has a lot of beautiful imperfections in it. The beeswax is smooth and golden, but flecked with bits of burned wicks and debris. And like the burned down remains of our stories that we carry with us, and like the imperfect bits of our humanity that bring texture to the divine love we also carry, we are melted, we are formed into something new, but the burned bits remain. That's the story of St. Cookies. I look forward to seeing you next week on All Saints' Day.